We've had hundreds of Americans that have traveled to fight in the region, and some of those have returned. So we talk about barbarians at the gate. We need to keep them out of the gate, and we need to monitor those who've gotten through the gate. This is a serious homeland security issue as well. We don't want to see what happened in Paris happen here in the United States.
The current chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Michael McCall of Texas, on CBS News Face the Nation, talking about the growing threat of sleeper cells in the United States, waiting for the right time to attack. Welcome back to America's Forum. And it turns out Congressman McCall is not the only person sounding the alarm. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson at least talked about this subject earlier. So the question remains, how might these sleeper cells be coming to the U.S.? The CIA has made clear that the border with Mexico is the weak link. With more on this developing story, let's turn to the former chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Peter King of New York. Peter, thank you so much for your time. It's good to have you back here on America's Forum.
Thank you, J.D. Always great to be with you.
Peter, there are reports, or at least speculation, that drug cartels are ushering in ISIS members who come into this country and then spread out and become sleeper cells. What do you think of that scenario? Is that plausible? Is that happening?
It's certainly plausible. I'm not aware of it happening, but having said that, you don't know what you don't know. And I do know that all our law enforcement intelligence agencies want to look at every possibility that ISIS could use to bring its agents into the United States. And it could be through Mexico, it could be through Canada, it could be even people coming back to the U.S., but we don't know we're in Syria in the first place. It's not. There's no. I can guarantee you that we do not have any way of knowing everyone that's gone to Syria, because a person can travel to France or Italy or Spain or wherever in Europe, work their way down through Turkey, get trained in Syria, and then just retrace their steps back into the U.S. So this is a ongoing issue. It's a real problem. Not just a problem. It's a real threat to the U.S. And we certainly have to assume that the more we carry out the attacks against ISIS, which we should, the more likely they are going to try to find a way to retaliate here in the U.S.
And as we are mentioning this, we see a story on our parent website, Newsmax.com, also saw some file footage of apparently illegal aliens getting into the United States. Pete, how do you react, or what is your reaction? Have you heard this about the administration? The Washington Times reports today that the administration has actually set up a hotline for illegals in this country to call and complain about being detained by federal agents. Have you heard of that, and what's your reaction?
Today was actually the first I heard about it, to be honest with you. So I am certainly going to be following up on that, checking on that. Talk about having your priorities out of whack and sending the wrong signal. This is just, again, at a time when we have to be worried about illegal immigration, where we have to be worried about people trying to sneak into the country, including foreign agents, to be somehow basically encouraging this behavior by telling them if they're not treated well, to give them a government phone number to call. It's just, again, it's totally the wrong signal.
Well, we know that last week, Peter, 5 people were arrested here in this nation for allegedly supporting ISIS. The people migrated here from Bosnia. 3 of them had already become naturalized U.S. citizens, the others with legal status as refugees. What does this say both about our visa program and the legalization process?
That means we have to be much more careful. Bosnia, going back to the 1990s, was really a hotbed for radical Islam, even before we were truly concerned about radical Islam. But that's where it got its first foothold, if you will, as far as I recall, in Europe. Would have been in Bosnia back in 1994, back in 1995, and throughout the late 1990s. And I think too often our immigration people are, again, I can't speak to each of these cases here right now. We have to be much more selective, much more careful in going through the backgrounds of people such as this, including, for instance, Iraqi refugees who come into the country, anyone coming from an area of the world where there has been Islamic terrorism, Islamic strongholds. They have to be looked at extra carefully. Everyone applying should be looked at very carefully, but extra carefully those coming from any of those sections of the world, and that includes Bosnia.
Suffice it to say, it needs extra scrutiny. We will continue to scrutinize the headlines with Peter King, the congressman from Long Island, very graciously staying with us through the break to talk about the budget battle over Homeland Security and more. You stay here, too, as America's Forum continues from Newsmax TV.
Kayla, along with our son and others, were held for nearly 2 years. And there were many opportunities along the way. And yet, nothing was done to save our young Americans.
Diane Foley, the mother of slain journalist James Foley, telling ABC News that in her opinion, the White House failed to do enough to save Americans held hostage by ISIS. We welcome you back with news that, as we assess the situation this morning, what can best be said about the the fate of another American aid worker, Kayla Mueller, remains unknown. ISIS claims she was killed in the Jordanian airstrike last week. The U.S. says it is investigating those claims but remains dubious. Meantime, the president plans to formally ask Congress to authorize use of military force against ISIS. For more on this story, let's continue our conversation with Congressman Peter King of New York. Pete, we appreciate your time. The whole question of ISIS and getting Americans back, what should we be doing?
Yeah, first of all, I think the administration is doing what it thinks it can do. But here's the problem. We have very limited intelligence resources on the ground. This is one of the after effects of the president pulling all the troops out of Iraq. Because when you have military presence there, they can provide a cover, provide assistance for intelligence operatives, enabling us to recruit other people on the ground, recruiting natives from the area. And that we've not been able to do. We virtually have no intelligence on the ground in Iraq or in Syria. And that's the only real way you're going to get any of these hostages back, unless you get lucky. And we're trying to monitor, we're trying to talk to who we can, but the reality is that not having an active intelligence presence on the ground makes it difficult. I understand the anguish of these families. I think, considering the position they put themselves in, the administration is probably doing all it can. But to me, the main issue goes back to not having a military presence there, the president being so emphatic in saying that we're never going to have troops on the ground. If you don't have troops on the ground at some level, it's very hard to maintain an intelligence presence. And that's almost the only way that you find out where any of these hostages could be being kept.
Pete, in the 2 minutes that remain, let's switch gears now to the ongoing budget battle in Washington. The future funding for the Department of Homeland Security still a matter of dispute. We have been hearing, it was curious last week, the president went to the Department of Homeland Security, was talking about employees there being laid off and using that kind of employee well-being card in his rhetorical arsenal. There's a lot more at stake than just those who are there under the supervision of Secretary Jay Johnson, aren't there?
Yeah. First of all, there's several issues here. One is it's the president's executive order, unilateral executive order, which many of us believe is unconstitutional and certainly was bad policy and certainly was a direct slap at Congress, a co-equal body, which has brought about this entire crisis. I hope that it can be resolved, though, because, there is the issue of the employees, but my main concern would be grants to go to the areas that are targets of terrorism. I don't want that cut off. At the same time, the president has to come in and negotiate. This is going to be a rough month coming up, and actually now it's down to 3 weeks. And the president has to just constantly has to stop this constant creating phony arguments, trying to bring everything to the edge. The fact is, John Boehner and Mitch McConnell would be willing to work with him, try to find a way forward. But again, it seems to be his way or the highway, and that's what got us into this issue in the first place.
30 seconds. It's obvious he's going to continue with his amnesty, and that becomes the bone of contention. Can he get away with what he's been doing in terms of providing amnesty via executive order? 30 seconds, Pete.
Well, the ultimate way to stop him is through an election, and he still has 2 years to go. We obviously going to court, obviously trying to find means of funding to cut off, but we can't do it in a way that puts the country at risk. So the president has a lot to answer for here. Well, I don't want to be as irresponsible as he is. We have to find a way to stop him, and if we do it incrementally, so be it, but it has to be done.
Congressman Peter King of New York. Sir, as always, we thank you for your time and your insights. We look forward to speaking with you again in the not-too-distant future. America's Forum will continue right after this.